Yes, hello and welcome to another action-packed play on the Scottish Football Show. Stick with us for the next hour as we bring you all things Scottish football. As always, I'm David Simmons and delighted to be joined by Anthony Brown and Stephen Commons. So make sure you stay tuned as we look back on the weekend's Scottish football in action, highlights and key talking points as well. On tonight's show, we're discussing the Saints as they go marching on. The Scotland squad has now been named. And who is your team of the season? Get in touch. We're fully live and interactive as always. Give us your opinion. Who's been your team of the season? We'll be discussing that later on as well. Don't forget, if you're watching via YouTube, subscribe to the State of Mind YouTube channel. Get on over to Twitter and follow our Twitter account as well. It's Play On the Scottish Football Show. Right, so let's start with the team of the moment, if you like. St Johnstone, they completed the greatest season in their history by lifting the Scottish Cup to complete the remarkable domestic Cup double this season. It takes something special to stand out in a season which has been completely dominated by Rangers. They've went on and knocked Celtic off the pedestal, if you like, of Scottish football. Stephen, where does this achievement rank for St Johnstone? How big of an achievement is this, really?
It's absolutely massive. This might be maybe over-egging it a wee bit, but I think it has to be put up there, maybe not alongside the likes of Leicester winning the league in England, but it can't be far off that. I mean, a team with St Johnstone's budget, with a manager who is in his first full year as a first team manager, with a group of players who have, some of them have come through the academy, some of them have been purchased from lower league teams in Scotland, all of which have cost the grand total of £0, 0 pence. For them to go on and win 2 of the 3 available domestic trophies in this country is absolutely phenomenal, to be honest. I mean, a lot's been said, obviously, that the first team to do it out with Aberdeen. I mean, I would argue it's an even bigger achievement than that, because Aberdeen at that time were a dominant side in Scottish football. St Johnstone are not. But we touched on it a couple of weeks ago, and their record from November till now is absolutely scarily good. I just think that Callum Davidson is just, I don't know what he's done, but he's just come across this magic formula where he seems to have just taken a group of, not average players, but guys who have maybe not fulfilled their potential and he's taken them to become something that they could probably never ever have imagined would be possible. So, I mean, I said a couple of weeks ago that Steven Gerrard would still be the manager of the year no matter what, and obviously that was the case because of when the votes were put in. But now, after kind of letting the dust settle, I just don't see any way that it couldn't be Callum Davidson and St Johnstone as the kind of the big story of the year. I just think that what they've achieved, you'll look back on that in 50 years, and all these guys that played in these two, the guys who've played in both finals, I think they'll never buy a drink in Perth again. I think these guys will live off that for the rest of their life. So, I mean, you have to take your hat off to them. A small sort of provincial team to have achieved what they've achieved is unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, we're fully interactive like every week. Do keep the comments coming. Hi to Scott tonight, who's coming straight away. Callum Davidson is the People's Manager of the Year, and I do have to agree. He's been superb. I mean, especially, Anthony, if you take into account, in February last year, the chairman, Steve Brownie, instigated a cut in their wage bill, describing their budget as unsustainable. 18 months on, and they've won 2 trophies, finished 5th in the league, they've qualified for Europe. I mean, what a story, mate, eh?
It is. I think that's the thing. I mean, as you guys know, I've been writing books about Hearts winning Scottish Cups, the 1998 one and the 2012 one. And within that, there's so many great stories. But I was just thinking today, God, if you were to write a book about this St Johnstone story, every individual has got a brilliant backstory. Like it's just a treasure trove of great little anecdotes. Not anecdotes, just more stories about how they've come to, I mean, 3 of those players were basically misfits at Hibs: David Wotherspoon, Callum Booth, and the winger Middleton. I mean, I'm maybe doing Wotherspoon a disservice calling him a misfit, but he was left out of 2 Scottish Cup finals for Hibs in his last 2 seasons. And then he goes on and wins 3 cups with St Johnstone. Callum Booth didn't quite cut the mustard at Hibs for whatever reason, went to Partick Thistle, sort of rebuilt his career there, goes to St Johnstone, wins the Scottish Cup against Hibs. Rooney, his story is well documented, scoring 2 winning goals in the one season, and both in the 32nd minute. I noticed it was flagged up, which is incredible. I mean, for a right back to score 2 winning goals in cup finals within 3 months, I don't think you can fully do that story justice, just how incredible it is. Then you've got the centre halves, Jamie McCart, 30 years on from his father winning the cup with Motherwell. Chris McCart, incredible. Jason Kerr, 24-year-old, captain of St Johnstone, double winning captain at 24-year-old, and now who knows where he's going to end up next. I mean, his reputation's soaring. Liam Gordon, very much like sort of Callum Booth, released by Hearts, not deemed good enough a few years back, rebuilds himself and has just turned into a really good Scottish Premiership centre half. Ali McCann, absolutely flying in the midfield. Chris Kane, by all accounts, I've not seen enough of him, but by all accounts, maybe not the greatest striker in the league, but he puts in a shift and he's ended up a legend. I mean, you could go right through that team, even the guys on the bench like Stevie May and O'Halloran coming off the bench, guys who have won the cups previously with St Johnstone, and then you go to the manager, and it's just incredible stories right through it. And I just echo what Stephen says in terms of winning 2 cups in one season. I mean, there's probably a couple of things in the past that could maybe be comparable, but in terms of modern day stuff, I don't think you'll see anything as incredible as this in terms of a team winning 2 cups in 3 months, 2 cups in one season, especially a team on St Johnstone's budget. I mean, it's a big deal when Celtic or Rangers win a double or a treble, and they've got all the money. So for St Johnstone to do it, it's just, we'll probably never see anything like that again in the next, well, I'm sure we will at some point in the future, but certainly in the near future, I can't imagine any team out with Celtic or Rangers doing that again. I mean, it's, even you look at, this is maybe not the best example, but Hibs had the chance to do it in 2016. They were favourites against Ross County, even though they were a championship team, and they lost to Ross County in the final. And then they went and beat Rangers. It just shows how hard it is, even when you're favourites in a final, to actually get over the line and do it. Like, it just to go right through both cup competitions unbeaten. It's a phenomenal achievement, and they're beating good teams along the way. It's not like they fluked it or dodged their way there. I mean, to win this Scottish Cup, they've beaten Rangers and Hibs, 2 of the 3 best teams in the country. I can't remember exactly who they beat in the League Cup final, maybe a slightly easier passage, but even still, they had to beat Hibs in the semi-final. They beat Livingston at a time when Livingston were absolutely flying. There's no way of talking this achievement down. It's absolutely phenomenal on so many levels.
Yeah, and if you think about it as well, it's all been done in Callum Davidson's first season as gaffer at St Johnstone, which makes it even more remarkable. Obviously, we're talking about this because if you've been hidden in a cupboard all weekend, it finished St Johnstone 1, Hibs 0 in the Scottish Cup final on Saturday. Wing back, like you said, Sean Rooney scored the winner in the League Cup final as well against Livingston. He rose above Josh Doig to head home after just over half an hour. The Hibs keeper, Matt Macy, made a couple of great double saves from Glenn Middleton's penalty and Chris Kane's rebound. Says otherwise held on easily for the Cup win, and it's their first since 2014. Stephen, I mean, Hibs, they just always seem to maybe lack that killer effect at Hampden, don't they? They just don't seem to cross the line and get that hands on the silverware, mate.
Yeah, so I mean, I sat yesterday and sat and thought about kind of where Hibs were and how did they manage to get to that situation. So, I texted a few of the guys I know who are big Hibs fans, and sort of said to them, like, obviously there's the outcry now for Jack Ross, he's a bottle merchant, we need to get rid of him, blah blah blah. So I texted him saying, how realistic is this? Like, how is this just a Twitter poll, or is this what the Hibs fans are actually thinking? And pretty much to a man, they all came back saying the same thing, that it wasn't to do with the style of play, the way it's all to do with big time games. When they get to Hampden, when they get to these big occasions, they never ever seem to do it. And the argument I had with them was, that's a Hibs thing. It's not a Jack Ross thing. Like, this is a Hibs thing that's went on for time immortal, really. The 2016 campaign was probably the exception to the rule rather than anything else. But what I said a couple of weeks ago on the show about the Hibs fans are so desperate for their club to have this sort of winner's mentality rather than expecting to go into these cup finals and lose or not make a good show of them. It's a bizarre way to look at, like, it's a bizarre situation to get into, because by all intents and purposes, this Hibs team is on paper the best Hibs team that they've had for the last 16 years minimum. They've achieved something in the league that they've not managed to do for nearly 2 decades, and yet when they get to this big occasion, they can't seem to kind of get that over the line and sort of put it to bed. But again, the comparisons were there between sort of Hibs and Aberdeen situation. That Aberdeen got rid of Derek McInnes despite his league showings, and we've obviously talked about that at length, that he consistently got them to third place or sometimes second place in the league, but their cup showing was poor. But I don't think you can even compare Aberdeen's cup showing against Hibs, because the majority of times Aberdeen were in a final or a semi-final, they were playing Celtic, and that Celtic team was unbelievable. Hibs have lost 3 semi-finals in 8 months to a Championship Hearts team and twice to St Johnstone. I'm not saying that Hibs have got any divine right to win those games, but they have to be asking questions as to why they couldn't make it stick against those 3 sides in 3 games in such a short period of time. I just think that they'll be so disappointed with their performance in that final. But the thing that got me looking at it and sort of watching the post-match interviews and stuff was that there didn't seem to even be any anger or anything. It was almost like we kind of half expected this. And it was not from the fans, but mainly from kind of Jack Ross did not seem overly angry or upset. He was more trying to kind of push we finished third, but I just don't think that's going to wash with a lot of fans. A lot of fans are looking at the kind of bigger picture and saying, like, yeah, we finished third, but there was no Hearts. It was a COVID season. Let's see what he does again next year. I just think it's gone from being what could have been an unbelievable season for Hibs to now there is question marks. I don't think anyone can deny that. There is question marks over pretty much the whole thing.
Yeah, hi to Ian for the message. Hibs were poor. Question marks against the manager and players such as Nisbet, Porteous, etc. Anthony, there has been sort of murmurings about maybe Boyle moving on as well. I mean, Nisbet's just been called up for the Scotland squad, which we'll talk about later. Porteous is proven to be quite a solid young defender as well. Do you think there will be many sort of rejigs and exits at Easter Road for next season?
I would imagine there would be. I mean, certainly Hibs players have had a lot of hype this season. The guys you mentioned there, Porteous, Nisbet, Boyle, Doig, and there's another one. I can't remember who it is. Jackson Irvine. I know he's not strictly speaking a Hibs player, but he's one that's in demand apparently. So, I would expect there would be players going out of Hibs this summer. I mean, I want to go back to what's happened with Hibs this season, because to me, it seems to be cliched to say that Hibs are bottle merchants because they don't win at Hampden. And I think that's utter rubbish. I don't think it comes down to bottle as such, because if Kevin Nisbet scores that penalty against Hearts, Hibs are in the final of the Scottish Cup. I don't think that was anything to do with bottle. I think it was a decent enough penalty. It was nothing to do. You can't accuse Kevin Nisbet of being a bottle job. He's shown so much in the last few years. He's not a bottler. And that was at the end of a tough week when his father had passed away. So it's all very well saying Hibs lost to Hearts, their bottle jobs, but the reality is they were a penalty kick away from one of the best goal-scoring strikers in the country of winning that tie, in which case that narrative doesn't really stand up. In terms of the other Hampden games, if they were bottle jobs at Hampden, they wouldn't have beat Dundee United. Dundee United are mid-table Premiership side. If Hibs were going to bottle it, they would have lost to Dundee United. I think the big issue here is, they missed a penalty against Hearts. Hearts were obviously fired up for it that day. As we've said before, no matter what Hearts' circumstances are, you would always fancy them to give Hibs a game, no matter how good Hibs are. It's the lie of the land in Edinburgh. Hearts can be right down on their luck, but if a derby comes along, they will always be there, and they'll be difficult opponents for Hibs. So I'm not excusing that defeat. I'm trying to explain why it may have happened and trying to give a bit of perspective to it. Then you go to the 2 St Johnstone games and you say, right, St Johnstone, you lose 3-0 in the first game. Again, I wouldn't necessarily put that one down to bottle, because Hibs were the better team in the first half. They missed a couple of good chances. And then, to be fair, they did implode in the second half. It was a pretty meek capitulation. But I wouldn't put that down to bottle, because if one of their chances goes in the first half, they probably go on and win that game, because St Johnstone weren't at the races for long periods of that game. St Johnstone end up winning 3-0. It all looks like a comprehensive St Johnstone win, and Hibs are fair game for all the criticism that comes their way. The cup final, again, you would think, I said before the game, I thought this game could go either way, but I felt Hibs might just turn up this time, and that the player for player, I don't think there's much between Hibs and St Johnstone. I think if you go through the squads, there's not a massive difference. I think where Hibs have the edge is obviously up front. I think any day of the week you would take Boyle, Doig and Nisbet over Kane and Middleton, the St Johnstone attackers. I don't think anybody would dispute that. But throughout the rest of the team, I don't think there's a massive difference. Xander Clark's probably on par with what Hibs had. St Johnstone's centre-halves are I wouldn't like to say they're better than Hibs centre halves, but they're certainly.
They're definitely they're streets ahead. They're streets
I'm
ahead
not convinced.
defensively.
Hanlon and Porteous have been in the best defence in the
look
country
at it as
this
a
season.
unit. Look at it as a unit. The St Johnstone defensive unit is probably the best in the league, out with Rangers. Like
I would disagree with that. Look at the goals conceded. Look at the goals conceded over the summer.
Again, you're looking at what's in front of them, mate. See the way that they play, the style of play that they've got. They're so well drilled by their manager. That back three, I don't know any team in Europe that looks as comfortable in a back three. Like, there's teams that play well back three at times. They look like they're a team absolutely made to play it. I just think that if Hibs had been a bit more clever, if Jack Ross's Hibs team have played St Johnstone the last 4 times they've played them, they have not scored a goal in 4 games. St Johnstone have won 10-0 every single time. So why not try something a bit different? Why not change up the formation? Even match them. Go 3 at the back. Bring in Darren McGregor.
Why would that? I keep hearing that from Hibs fans, and I don't understand what this plan B is that they're on about. Like, this formation that they've played has got them at 3rd place. The way they've gone, people keep shouting, do something different. But what is that something different though? That's the bit I don't understand. What are people wanting that didn't happen? I didn't see anybody complaining about the team he picked at the weekend. Folk were saying, maybe McGregor should have played instead of Porteous. Would that have made any difference to the outcome? I'm not sure it would.
I'm just saying that if you've come up against an opponent 3 times and you've failed to score against them, you playing this system that's done you so well in the league. Yeah, I agree with that. Perfect. But if you're coming up against the same opponent that you've failed to score in 3 attempts, you're coming up against them in a cup final. Do you not think to yourself, maybe we should not go with the system that we've had all season that's done us so well against everybody else other than St Johnstone? Maybe we should try and change it up a wee bit. They've got options there. They could have easily. I mean, I'm not saying to bring in McGregor or not. Like, they could have went man for man. If you're saying that their players are as good as St Johnstone, if not better, we'll prove it then. Go man for man against them and see what happens.
I'm sure they have mixed it up in the games. I can't remember specifically how they played 2 or 3 months ago in terms of, but the Hibs have definitely switched between 3 and 2 at the back, 3 and 4 at the back rather. So they're not set in their ways of playing this 4-4-2 or whatever it was at the weekend with Jackson Irvine on the left. It felt a wee bit lopsided, but it's easy to say that in hindsight. But they've picked up enough results with that sort of personnel in those positions. I do take your point about they could have mixed it up, but I mean, what do you do? Pull Nisbet out of the team and go with Doidge and Boyle up front? I mean, if Hibs lose the game and Nisbet's on the bench, or even if Doidge is on the bench, there's going to be serious questions asked there. I don't really see what he could have done too differently. I mean, in hindsight, obviously, you would say, right, completely pick a different team because that one didn't work. But at the time, I would have said, sure, the only thing I would have changed, actually, in terms of the starting lineup was the goalkeeper, and that was the one that actually worked. In terms of, I thought Marciano should have started just because he was the established number 1 for 5 years and all that. But obviously,
Tony, I'm going to use a subject close to your heart to blow your theory out the water, right? That the Hearts team in '98 played away all season and did really, really well. They got close to win, not close to winning the league, but they pushed the Old Firm all the way that season in the league. That cup final, they played a 4-5-1 formation that they had never played before. They completely changed that up because they knew they were coming up against a team that they had struggled against in the league all season. So there's nothing to say that you can't change your system in a cup final. You've got a squad there for a reason. Like, any player that Hibs would have brought in for that game, they're not going to bring in some kid off through the youth system. They had players on that bench that could have made a difference and changed the formation. I'm not saying that they should have or shouldn't have, but it certainly should have been a consideration for Jack Ross to say.
Oh no, I know. I just think it's a bit harsh to say he doesn't change his formation because he's switched between 3 and 4 at the back all season. He's not. People keep saying that he's literally picked this team in all 4 of these games against St Johnstone, which is not the case. He's had different personnel in there. Yes, he's probably gone with Doidge, Boyle, and Nisbet for most of those games. I think there was maybe a period where Nisbet was out of the team after his transfer, and then there was a period where Doidge was out of the team. So it's not like he sent out the same 11 in the same formation in each of these 4 games. That's the bit where I think people are being a wee bit. I think you need to go through each game and say, how did he set up in that game? He's probably tweaked it. I can't remember specifics of each game, but he's definitely not sent them out in literally the same formation, the same system, the same personnel for all these 4 games. So I think to say that he's not changed it, I mean, he changed it at half time. He brought Murphy on. I know it wasn't strictly speaking a formation change, but it was more 2 wingers in terms of Murphy and Boyle out wide. But again, it just, in hindsight, he probably should have taken Doidge or Nisbet off and put Boyle through the middle because there was just, The game it reminded me of, which I'm sure you'll remember, Stephen, is the Hearts St Mirren League Cup final in 2013.
Yeah.
Hearts were just lobbing balls in, and St Mirren were dealing them all day long, and you just thought Hearts are never going to score here. It was up to John Sutton and Michael Ngoo, I think, were the two strikers, and it was just one of those days you just thought Hearts can play here all day, and they're not going to get back in this game. And I felt the same way on Saturday. You just start the second half, you just thought Hibs are. It felt like St Johnstone had that game with a vice-like grip on it from probably an hour onwards, and sometimes you think, oh, there's still 10 minutes to go, they might have a wee rally at the end, but you just never felt Hibs were going to get back in that game on Saturday. And yeah, I'm not excusing Jack Ross of blame for that in any way. I'm just trying to say I don't think necessarily playing three at the back or mixing it up completely would have made a massive difference. I just think St Johnstone have a way of playing that anybody would have struggled with. I mean, you look at the results since the turn of the year, they've lost 4 games since December. 2 against Celtic, I think it is, 1 against Rangers and 1 against Aberdeen. Or it might be the other way around with Celtic and Rangers, but 3 of them to the Old Firm, 1 against Aberdeen. They've not lost to anybody else. They've kept probably clean sheets in half of those games. I think if you put Hearts, Hibs, Aberdeen, Dundee United up against them in that Scottish Cup final, the way they played and approached that game, I think they would all struggle to beat them. And I would probably include Rangers and Celtic in that. I think if they went up against St Johnstone in this form that they've been in over the last few months, I think you'd probably fancy Rangers or Celtic to find a way just because they have that bit of superior quality. But I definitely think they would struggle to break that St Johnstone team down. And it looks bad on paper because Hibs have lost to them twice in big cup games and have lost to them the last 4 times. But to be honest, in a way, Hibs have probably been unfortunate that of all the teams they've come up against the form team in the league out with the Old Firm since the turn of the year. I mean, if they'd been up against Dundee United or St Mirren or Livingston on Saturday, Hibs would have won the game, I'm sure. I'm pretty confident of that. They came up against the I don't want to call them stuffy because they're far more than that, but they are a stuffy team first and foremost, but they can play as well. That's the thing. They're not just like under Tommy Wright, they had that reputation of being really hard to beat, really horrible to play against, and they were. Whereas here, you feel they've got a wee bit of quality going forward. Like Wotherspoon, the way he was moving about the pitch, he was like Pirlo at times, just drifting about the pitch and playing the game at his own pace. It was brilliant to watch.
Yeah, so I mean, that's why we're asking the question, who is your team of the season? Is it St Johnstone? Monty seems to think so. St Johnstone, team of the season, without a doubt. Get your comments in. Tell us who you think the team of the season is and why. Is it Rangers, who've went the whole season undefeated? Is it Livingston? Livingston went through that patch. David Martindale's came in. Or is it Ross County, because Yogi Hughes managed to save them from relegation? And obviously the news is broke today that Yogi Hughes has parted ways with Ross County. He's away to explore further football opportunities. Stephen, what do you take from that comment, if you like?
I mean, I think it's what you see is what you get. I think he's obviously got wind of a potential position somewhere else, whether that be a manager's job or a director of football or something that is more appealing, whether it be geographically, financially, or maybe just in football terms, than the job he had at Ross County. By the looks of what they had said in the statement, reading between the lines, I think it kind of maybe intimates that Ross County had offered him the position to stay on and that he chose not to and went on to move somewhere else. So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up next, because I think, and it'll also be interesting to see where Ross County go next as well, because they've obviously tried a number of different routes in their last few appointments. So it'll be really interesting whether they go for a tried and tested, or they maybe try and go outside the box and move for someone. But again, it's the same problem that they have when they're trying to attract players. That to get someone to come up to that part of the Highlands it's a big undertaking, because you can't. I mean, a lot of players, when they come and sign for Hearts or Hibs or Dundee United or Dundee, can still stay in Glasgow or in Edinburgh and just commute. That's an impossibility when you're at Dingwall. So it'll be interesting to see where they go from here. But yeah, I think Yogi can hold his head up high. He was out of the game for so long that I think he's not used that Ross County position, because I think he obviously went there with every intention of doing a good job, and he managed to do that in the end. So his stock is back up, and I think if he can get a decent position somewhere, whether it be somewhere in Scotland or abroad or down south, then good on him.
It
Yeah, no,
feels like a sort of Sam Allardyce situation. You know, how Sam Allardyce usually goes into a club, saves them from relegation, then bails out, and he's stocks high enough because he's not had time to sort of drift into crisis, if you like. I mean, I'm not saying Yogi would have drifted into crisis, but you know what I mean. He's saved them. He's done what he was brought in to do, and he's got out the door before anything can go wrong. And I just, to me, I don't see him going any higher than Ross County. I don't think he's. I know you're a fan of him, David, in terms of his overall, just what he brings to a club, but I'm not convinced his stock level is high enough to go into a club much bigger than Ross County at the moment. I mean, if Dundee United, Aberdeen, Hibs, Hearts came up, he wouldn't be talked about for those. And I don't really see many opportunities there for him to go high, unless he just wants to come back to the Central Belt, which is fair enough.
That's why I was saying maybe a director of football's position somewhere. Like maybe he's maybe looking at like a smaller club, but with a lot more freedom to kind of approach things that way, because he's big on style of play and academy work and things like that. So a director of football job at a sort of medium-sized club, whether that be a Motherwell or a Dundee United or something, I think that would be very something that would probably interest him a lot. Either that, or he's maybe going to go back to Falkirk or something. I don't know.
Well, that's it. And you've got to, something I was going to talk on a bit later on the show, is that the Dunfermline job's become available as well. Stevie Crawford has walked away from that. Do you think he could do a job there at the Pars, Anthony?
I think he could do a job, yeah. I mean, I guess that would be an obvious one for him in terms of it being vacant and being in the Central Belt. So maybe there is something in that. But I mean, one name that's obviously been linked with the Dunfermline job that I think would probably be of interest to Ross County as well is Petrie, Stuart Petrie, the Montrose manager. I mean, he has done an absolutely phenomenal job in the last 4 or 5 years. I think he took over in December 2016 when they were bottom of League Two and the finish in the top 4 of League One the past 3 years, very close to getting promoted to the Championship. So he's the outstanding manager out with the top 2 divisions at the moment in terms of what he's achieved in recent years. You could argue he's the outstanding manager out with the Premiership. But I don't know if there's some situation whereby his work restricts him from taking on a full-time position at a club. That certainly seems to be the murmurs that he's in a pretty good position.
Yeah, I think he's high up in the bank from what I'm led to believe. I think he's got quite a...
If he was to... I remember there was a manager similar to that. There was a guy called Neil Watt. He used to manage Stranraer maybe about 15 years ago, and he was a really good manager at that level, just constantly had Stranraer punching above their weight. And I kept thinking, why is this guy not getting picked up by anybody? And it transpired that he had a job that was pretty good, and he was better off staying in part-time football and just doing Stranraer on the side of his main job. So I wonder if it sounds like Petrie's probably in a similar predicament. But I dare say if Dunfermline were to go knocking, he would have to consider it, because he's obviously a club legend there, and he was such a great player for them. I think if they were to ask the question, I would imagine he would have to do a bit of thinking with regard to taking it on. And even if Ross County were to chap his door, he might say, right, maybe this is my time. I've done really well in the lower leagues. I've earned a crack at this. Let's give it a go, sort of thing. So I don't know. You need to ask Stuart that, but certainly he would be the number one name for me on both of those lists, Dunfermline and Ross County at the moment.
Yeah, well, I've got a friend who's kind of involved at Dunfermline, and I did think that Stevie Crawford was a bit of a strange decision in why he left. Now, the sources close to me have told that he wasn't quite provided the assurances next season that he would get the budget to be able to sustain Dunfermline, to get them up to the closer fighting for the top league, if you like. New managers that have been rumoured, I'm hearing the likes of Peter Grant, Stuart Petrie, like you said there, Anthony. Another name that got flung into the hat, Stephen, was Barry Ferguson. Do you think Barry Ferguson would take the Dunfermline job? Or I did see a comment that was made earlier on here, and I'm going to look it up while you answer this question, because I don't know if this news has maybe just happened while we're on air. So do you think Barry Ferguson could go in at Dunfermline? Well,
we discussed it very briefly before we came on air, and I said to you, it's funny that you should say that, because I listened to the podcast from BBC's Sports Sound show last night, and obviously they covered the playoff game, and they interviewed Barry Ferguson after the game. And the one thing that came to me was that he was very non-committal about his future and stuff when he was talking about Kelty. He said, I'm just really happy that we've finally managed to get the club to where they belong. And they were saying to him, so what's your aim for next season? He said, I don't want to talk about next season. I'm just wanting to enjoy the night with my boys and just get in there and with these guys that I've worked so hard and stuff. He was very non-committal, and he didn't really make any comment that made me think, it was just up until that point, I'd never even considered the fact that he might move on. But after hearing that interview, I thought, well, hold on a minute here. Maybe there's something more here that's going on. But I didn't really put two and two together until you had said, he's apparently linked with the Dunfermline job. I thought, well, that actually makes a bit of sense now.
No, it's just down the road, isn't it? So Dunfermline will be well aware of what he's doing at Kelty.
Yeah, well, here's a comment. So, Alan McFadden, Barry Ferguson has left Kelty to go to Alloa. I've just Googled Barry Ferguson just now. I've got a device in front of me here. Barry Ferguson poised for Alloa job as Rangers legend set to leave Kelty Hearts. That was posted 2 hours ago. So if we've 20 minutes ago, Rangers hero Barry Ferguson confirms Kelty Heart exit. Yes, so it's genuine. Alan's spot on. It looks like Barry Ferguson's Kelty Hearts reign is over, and he's moving on elsewhere. So yeah.
It's a surprising one, because I mean, I could understand if Alloa were still in the Championship, but they got relegated, didn't they? So they're in the League One.
Alloa are they're a good like jumping off point for a lot of managers. If you look at who they've had before, obviously Hartley, and then he went on to bigger things. Then Jack Ross went on to bigger things. Then Goodwin. So they're maybe a good sort of. If I'm Mike Mulroney, that's how I'm selling my club to any sort of young manager that I'm trying to get. Is listen, you come here, and if you do a good job here, people look at you. You're very visible if you come here and you do well. So I just think it depends how. Maybe Barry Ferguson's got a bit of a taste for it again and thought, actually, I could do with getting back into full-time football. If he's going to be doing part-time football, then you're not going to get much higher up than Alloa. Maybe only Arbroath are the only other part-time team that are above them in sort of league position wise. And plus, Peter Grant's built a good squad there. I realise they got relegated at the Championship, but if they can hold on to a lot of those players, I think Barry Ferguson would have a much better chance of maybe either taking them up or doing a good enough job that he could get a Premiership job next year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just reading the statement from Barry Ferguson there. He said, it was a decision I made a few months ago during the second lockdown. I had a lot of thinking to do about going forward. I made my choice no matter what had happened at Kelty. I was going to move on. I informed the club last night. It was a tough meeting I had to have with them. It was an emotional night, getting promoted. But I think they respected the way I did it eye to eye. They were disappointed, but hey, we move on. So yeah, I mean, if you've just joined us, Barry Ferguson has left his position at Kelty Hearts to take on what looks like to be the managerial role at Alloa Athletic. So we'll just quickly jump into the game yesterday. I mean, it finished Brecon City 0, Kelty Hearts 1. It finished 3-1 on aggregate as Kelty Hearts now secure their place in the SPFL for the first time. Stephen, you've obviously been quite open every week about your feelings towards Brecon City. You'll be happy to see Kelty be a welcomed addition to the senior ranks, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know that kind of maybe half jokingly that I'd had this sort of vendetta against Brecon, but I think it was more the process that I was angry about than Brecon themselves as a club. I just think that the situation with Ken Ferguson and their club was so, to me, from the way I view it, it was a perfect example of everything that's wrong with Scottish football. That these guys were trying to impose their position of authority within the footballing pyramid to try and stop teams from getting their rightful place in the league. And I've said this for years and years, that any club that doesn't want to push themselves and doesn't want, they're not ambitious and they don't want to move up the leagues and they're quite happy just being a League Two club, well, that's fine. But see, if you find yourself in a position where you're at the bottom of the league, that you've got nobody to blame other than yourself. If these teams, like through financial hardship or whatever, are struggling, then I'm sorry, but that's just where you are. The pyramid system is there, that it's fair, and every team who wants to progress and has the financial wherewithal to do that will be able to jump up this pyramid system pretty rapidly, as shown by the clubs that have managed to kind of make a really good showing of themselves. Edinburgh City and Cove kind of being the main two. I just think that Kelty will be the next one of them. As long as the owner doesn't pull out the funding, and as long as they can obviously replace Barry Ferguson with another decent appointment, whether it be an experienced coach or maybe another young up and coming guy that wants a crack at the league system, then I think that they've got everything in the place that they can do that. And I think clubs like Brecon, I mean, they've just been on an absolute free fall for the last 4 or 5 years, and no matter what they did, they couldn't turn that round. And as I say, it's nothing against the club, it's nothing against the players or the fans or anything like that. I just think that the despicable actions of their chairman is just something it's a perfect example of everything that's wrong, and I'm glad to see that his club, whether it be through hard work or whatever, if they can get back to where they belong, back in the football league system, then great. But I don't want to see him back as part of the deal. I would hopefully he'll move on and someone else can come in and obviously try and address the problems that they've had at that club for at least 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, looking at some of the comments that have come in, I thought Hamilton would have went for Ferguson. I mean, Hamilton are still sticking by Brian Rice, I believe, so there's not a vacancy there, but he thought that Hamilton might have went chasing for Ferguson. Alloa, that's a bad move. Should have stayed at Kelty for 1 season. It's a tough one to call, really, I think. I mean, yeah, he's done a great job at Kelty, but I mean, he's got to look at maybe the bigger picture. Has he taken them as far as he can, or are they going to progress through the leagues? That result, anyway, at the weekend, that brings an end to Brechin City's 67-year stay in the top leagues, as they are now relegated to what looks like they'll play in the Highland League. Kilmarnock's 28-year stay in the top flight, it's in danger tonight, despite being pulling back a late goal against Dundee at the weekend, where it finished Dundee 2, Kilmarnock 1. The return leg, like I say, is taking place tonight. How do you see that one playing out, Anthony?
Very interesting. It is perfectly poised, and like from a neutral perspective, in terms of it having all the potential to be a really exciting game tonight, or certainly a tense game anyway. I think, as I touched on last week, if this was, for instance, no disrespect to Wraith Rovers, but Wraith Rovers or even Dunfermline that Kilmarnock were playing, I would strongly fancy Kilmarnock to just turn up and do what they need to do to overturn the deficit tonight. Because it's Dundee, and Dundee have got some big time players in there. Dundee have got like Fontaine, Charlie Adam, Jason Cummings. I'm not convinced Dundee will be intimidated or daunted by the prospect of going to Kilmarnock tonight. I think Dundee will be, if they turn up, are perfectly capable of probably winning at Kilmarnock tonight, and maybe even winning handsomely. Equally, however, you've got this situation of Kyle Lafferty being in there. He's obviously been a complete talisman since he's gone in January, and you wouldn't be surprised if he single-handedly turned this tie around and battered in a hat-trick in the first half hour, whatever. So it could go either way. If you force me, I would go for Kilmarnock to get the job done and sneak through, or maybe even go through quite convincingly. But I'm sort of sitting on the fence here, but I would not be surprised if Dundee do get an early goal and are able to sort of take the sting out of the tie almost.
Yeah, well, it's the final game of the season. It's happening tonight with a 8:15 kickoff. Dundee are the informed team. They've won 4 of the last 5 games, head into the second leg very much in form. But Killie have been here before. 5 years ago, after losing the first leg in the playoff to Falkirk, they were on their way down before they turned things around in emphatic fashion in the second leg. Stephen, have they got it in them to do it again tonight? What's your opinion on this?
I pretty much agree with everything that Anthony's just said, to be honest. I think he's spot on when he says that it's one of those games where it could go either way. Killie have got it in their locker to pull out. I mean, they've beaten Dundee United comfortably. They have got it within them to pull out maybe a 2 or a 3-0 comfortable win tonight. And you've got, as much as Dundee have got experienced players, you've got Chris Burke, you've got Kyle Lafferty. It's not a team of kids that they're coming up against. But I watched that first leg, and I thought Dundee looked comfortable at periods. I thought Killie looked quite disjointed, and they didn't really look like they had a clear plan. But I think that's obviously, I mean, that's what's got them in this position that they're in. I mean, you look through the team man for man. You've still got Alan Power, you've still got Kirk Broadfoot, you've still got guys who did so well under Steve Clarke. That I just think they're not a bad side, but their inconsistency is what's got them to the second bottom position in the league. So if they can have a good night tonight, they'll win comfortably. If they don't, it could be very, very interesting to see what happens. And I think Dundee are more than capable of taking advantage of that, because they've got guys who can make the difference in the final third going the other way as well. So it's got it's got all the elements to be a great game. But I tipped Killie to beat them, and I'm sticking by that. I'm hopeful that Killie will do the job and keep Dundee down.
Well, time will soon tell. I mean, you mentioned Steve Clarke there. I mean, he's now named his Scotland squad that's going to be taking part in the Euros. We now know that young trio Gilmore, Turnbull and Patterson have their place in the squad. Was there any shocks, Anthony, in that squad? Was anybody you felt missed out that maybe deserved a place in Steve Clarke's squad?
I think with any international squad, there's always guys you could look at and say, well, he deserves to be in. You could make a case for him. I think in this instance, the one that you really feel for is Ryan Gauld, because he was he's had a great season in Portugal in a very good league, obviously playing in a team that's ended up getting relegated, but I've not seen enough of him. By all accounts, the best player in the team by a distance, and one of the best players in the league in terms of the consistency of his performances over the season. So I think it's very unusual for Scotland to be in a position where they can leave out a player who's been thriving in a league like the Portuguese league, which I think most people would accept as stronger than the Scottish league. So I think he can definitely feel hard done by about not being included. I think probably he just ran out of time, because you could have said he maybe had a claim to be in the squads earlier on, maybe a couple of months ago, but by the time it was clear to everybody that he was ready to probably step into the national team, then he'd maybe just run out of time. But equally, having said that, the likes of Turnbull and Gilmore and Patterson have been able to get themselves in at the last minute. So maybe it was just a case of Steve Clarke not having room for all of these guys, because, I mean, it would be pretty radical to bring in 4 guys from outside who have not been involved. You could argue also pretty harsh, because that would involve pushing a lot of guys out who have been part of the journey, if you like. I mean, I think Callum Patterson's probably one of the unfortunate ones in that regard. I don't know if, to be fair, Callum's probably not done enough to guarantee being in the squad in terms of his contribution to the national team since he's been in, but certainly having been part of the squad for the last couple of years, he'll feel disappointed that he's just been edged out there at the last minute. And obviously the injuries to Jack, McBurney and McLean have created a few voids for these younger guys to come in. So I mean, you look at the Scotland squad and you say, right, that's a pretty good squad. That's as far as Scotland squads go of the last few years. If you could be going into Euros with that squad, I think most people would be pretty happy. The only one this is, again, I can see why he's not taking him. I would maybe have taken Griffiths, just for the sort of, maybe X factor's the wrong word, but he's the sort of guy you can bring off the bench and you know he's going to do something for you. Even if he's not fully fit and in form, he's probably got a goal up his sleeve. I'm not convinced that Nisbet, as much as he's had a great season, is that sort of player. Nisbet's not going to start for Scotland. It's going to be Adams and or Dykes. And so your next striker is the guy who's going to come off the bench. If Scotland were playing Croatia in a tight game, you need a late winner, you need a late equaliser. Who would I rather have coming off the bench, Kevin Nisbet or Leigh Griffiths? Leigh Griffiths all day long. I know on the basis of what's going on in this season that might seem odd, but I think a lot of Scotland fans would probably agree with that, in the sense that he has got that wee spark about him. He's not got a talisman, because he's not played often enough for Scotland to be a talisman. He's not scored often enough, but you just always feel he could produce something out of nothing without being at his best. And I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not saying anything against Nisbet, because he has fully deserved his call-up on the basis of what he's done over the course of the season. But personally, I would have erred towards taking Griffiths and Gauld. They would have been the two that I would look to have had in there that aren't in there.
Yeah,
here's a quick question though, right? And I agree with you when it comes to the Griffiths side of things. I think Scotland only having 3 strikers. But see, if you were to take Leigh Griffiths, who would you have left out?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'd probably have left Nisbet at home. I know that sounds harsh, but I'd probably taken Griffiths over Nisbet, just because Nisbet isn't going to start games. If Nisbet was going to start games, you'd say fair enough. He's fitter, he's fresher, he's in form. You can probably rely on him a bit more at the moment, but I think Nisbet's only in there as an impact sub at the moment, because he isn't going to start ahead of Adams
I think
or Dykes.
you're spot on, because see, if Adams or Dykes gets injured, I still think he goes with a Ryan Fraser or something up front rather than puts Nisbet in for the
Christie,
start. Yeah. I think you're spot on.
I mean, Scott agrees with you as well. Should have took Griffiths, a natural goal scorer, best in Scotland on his day, something Scotland don't have a lot of. There was other comments coming in as well who kind of agreed that Gauld should have went. Yep, Gauld should have went in for Fleck. Clark's team needs more flair and goals, so Gauld is a better option than Fleck. Absolutely.
We'd even have we've got a lot of fullbacks in the team. we've got the 2 right backs, Patterson and O'Donnell, and we've got 3 left backs. I know Tierney's maybe been earmarked as a centre half, but in that case, you've maybe then got 2 centre halves if you're viewing Tierney as a left centre half, because we've got 10 defenders in total, 5 of them full backs, 5 centre halves. Tierney obviously can play centre half as well. I think you could have probably left out Greg Taylor and taken Gauld. But then you could make the case that you've got too many of these little players that play just behind the striker, the likes of Gauld, Turnbull, Gilmore can all play there. And
Forrest will just play off the striker like he's done for Celtic, just as you were saying that, Anthony.
Yeah, so there's a lot of similar players. So I can see why Gould's not been included, but personally I would have found a place for him.
I realise I might be completely and utterly living in the moment here, but I just think that it's ridiculous that no St Johnstone player got into the Scotland squad.
You literally took the words out of my mouth. You literally took the words out of my mouth. That's my next question.
It might be recency bias, but I still think that, and I realise that this would never come into Steve Clarke's way of thinking, because he's loyal and he wants to stick with the guys who have got him there through that journey, and that's fair, and that's absolutely fair enough. But if you're picking a Scotland squad based on form and ability at this moment in time, you wouldn't pick Stephen O'Donnell, you would have picked Sean Rooney. You wouldn't pick Declan Gallagher, you would have arguably picked Jason Kerr or another. It's but I can see why he's done it, and don't get me wrong, I'm not sitting here screaming that Steve Clarke's done the wrong thing, but I just think that for a team to have achieved what St Johnstone achieved this season, and then you've got the Xander Clarke argument.
Third keeper, absolutely.
Aye, exactly. For there to be no St Johnstone player and for there to be a Hearts player, and I realise that Hearts player is Craig Gordon, but for that to happen, it's just ridiculous, to be honest.
Well, Rooney, the way I know, again, we're unfortunate probably that the squad's been picked last week before this week. I mean, Rooney's just got, no matter whether he's a better right back than O'Donnell or not, he's playing at a level now where his confidence is going to be absolutely through the roof.
He's also playing in a system. He's also playing in a system which is perfectly, probably exactly what Scotland are going to play. So I think it would have been a great pick to take him.
And I would think, with no disrespect to O'Donnell, but I think probably the right wing back area is the weak point of the squad. I mean, people will point to Patterson and say he's absolutely flying, but he's not played that many first team games. No. If Scotland were, I can understand why Patterson's in, but personally, if you said to me, who do you want starting in the Euros, Rooney, O'Donnell or Patterson, I would have picked Rooney, just on the basis of the confidence and he's almost like a sort of, I don't know, remember when Considine came into the squad and he became a wee cult hero? I think Rooney would be dead set for being that sort of cult hero for the Euros, almost like your poster boy for the Euros, the heroic club right back who's come from nowhere into the squad. And I think that would have just been a real symbol of he'd have represented St Johnstone well, and it would have been a really good thing just to sort of cap off an incredible season for him.
Yeah, and like John says on the comments there, Rooney's also popped up with 2 very important goals, 2 high-profile goals in important matches.
Goal threat in the opposition box as well, which I'm not sure Patterson and O'Donnell would be.
Yeah. I mean, there was a statement released today as well where we're talking about the Euros that there is no plan B with regards to fans being at Hampden for Euro 2020 should Glasgow stay in level 3 of Scottish Government restrictions, says the Scottish FA. Doubts remain whether fans will be allowed in. A minimum crowd of 12,000 has been agreed with UEFA for the games at Hampden, and Chief Executive Ian Maxwell says the SFA and the government remain committed to that number. So the games will happen, despite whether it'll be in closed doors or whether it be with a minimum of 12,000. There can't be any plan B in terms of spectators because of ticket sales and stadium processes and all those things as well. But hopefully it doesn't come to that point. Glasgow do remain in level 3, however. But I mean, we've said this over and over, Stephen, as well. There'd be nothing more Scottish than for Scotland to qualify for the first major championship and no fans be allowed in the stadium.
It would just be typical. It would just sum up this year and how strange it's been. But you just have to hope that that's not going to be the case. I mean, I don't know if you guys watched the FA Cup final on a couple of weekends ago. That was the first game I had watched that had proper. I mean, it wasn't even anywhere near capacity, but had proper fans in. What a difference! What a difference! Like, I'd forgotten what it was like to actually have fans reacting to what was happening on the park, shouting abuse at folk, like try to throw like Coke cups at fucking people. Just wee stupid things that you would have seen every single week up and down the country. But you need something in there. I mean, obviously, all the Premiership games yesterday in England all had, I think it was 30% capacity at each of the stadiums, and the difference it makes in the atmosphere. I mean, it's not going to be the same, but it's going to be much better than playing in front of zero crowds with a FIFA background noise. And I just think that Scotland, the Scottish government, just need to keep an eye on things. I mean, I understand that obviously people's health comes first, and I get that, but I just think that they've made exceptions for other things up and down this country, and I just think that they need to kind of look at this and say, yeah, it doesn't outrank everything else, but if things can kind of stay as they are, or hopefully slightly improve, because they're now rolling out the vaccine to the majority of people 18 to 30 now, so that's the vast majority of the population, and you would hope that that's you're going to see a sort of kick-on effect from that, and hope to pray to whoever it is you pray to that there is going to be. I mean, 12,000 is no ideal, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah, I mean, Hampden is due to host 4 games at the tournament, 3 group stages, 2 of which Scotland are involved in, and a last 16 tie as well. I mean, some of the comments, John saying that obviously what you said, Stephen, as well, England has 10 to 20,000 fans watching, no excuses not for us to have fans. But despite that, I mean, Glasgow is still the only Scottish region which remains in level 3, meaning that large crowds are prohibited in the city. Anthony, but we're talking about Hampden here as well. By the sounds of it in this statement, it's either going to be a minimum of 12,000 or nobody at all. But I mean, like we said, there's 4 games happening in the city. You've got the likes of the fan parks as well. I mean, the whole city as a general would miss out on what could be a euphoric sort of couple of weeks in Glasgow if this wasn't to happen, wouldn't it?
I'd be very surprised if it gets reversed, because all the football associations had to give guarantees to UEFA by, I think it was the start of last month, with regard to how many supporters they could hold, how many supporters they were willing to take in the stadiums. Otherwise, they had to relinquish the games, as happened in, I think it was Dublin and Bilbao. They had to give it up. So it would be very poor form. I understand, obviously, it would be out with the SFA's control to an extent, but it wouldn't reflect well on Scotland if we were the only country that said, yeah, we can do it, and then at the last minute pull the plug and say, oh no, we're not letting supporters in. So I think there would be serious pressure from UEFA to ensure that regardless of what the situation is in Glasgow and Scotland at the time, that supporters are allowed in that stadium. I don't think there will be a U-turn on that. I mean, anything's possible, as we've seen over the past 13, 14 months with COVID. You just can't call how things are going to evolve, but I'd be very surprised at this stage if Scotland went from having 12,000 supporters in the stadium to having 0. I don't know if UEFA would allow that.
Yeah. They
would probably take the games elsewhere if they had enough time to do it, and Scotland would lose out. So I'm not sure that situation will come to fruition.
No, hopefully not. Hopefully we get fans in the stadium in time for the Euros. This is our last show for the season. It's we're going to be taking a little break over the summer, and we'll be back in time for the season kicking off next year. But for next season's show, guys, I need to get a breaking news sound effect that we can play. I seen a comment here, so I just quickly Googled it. 13 minutes ago in the Dundee Courier, Mickey Mellon set for Dundee United exit. Mickey Mellon's time at Dundee United is set to end after only a season in charge at United.
Yogi. That's where he's
Stuart Petrie.
Oh, no. Well, who do we think then? I mean, on a day, I mean, it was Kenny Whitson's comment that popped up that prompted me to Google and see if there was any truth in the matter. So what's your thoughts on John Hughes, Mickey Mellon and Barry Ferguson all quitting today?
So Mickey Mellon's going to take over at Kelty Hearts, is that it?
Nah, Mickey Mellon's going to Doncaster. That's been the worst kept secret in football for about the last 6 months. Doncaster have been desperate to get him for a long period of time, and they've just had an interim manager in charge. Everyone was questioning why. This is probably why. And then the merry-go-round continues. That I think that's an absolute shoo-in that Yogi gets that job.
Dundee United, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's not going to leave a solid job at Ross County if he isn't getting something closer to the Central Belt. I think he gets that job all day long. Who else are Dundee United going to get unless they go for
Stevie Crawford's out of job.
Callum Davidson. Dundee United have a habit of looking towards St Johnstone managers. It never seems to come to fruition, but I'm sure they generally tend to get linked to them.
Nobody's leaving St Johnstone to go to Dundee United as things stand now. That is just not happening. Eh?
And then also you've got Craig Levine out of job as well, guys. Just
Dundee United links. I think, to be honest, that's probably the one club where the supporters would accept him because he's a bit of a hero there still, Craig Levine.
Good luck to Dundee United. That's all I would say on that one.
So I just thought I would throw that in the mix. Like I say, we should really get. By the way, why have we never even thought of this? Why have we not thought of this? Everybody in the comments, McInnes.
Oh, right enough. Yep, perfect.
West Brom.
Think so, West Brom?
But I can see him if West Brom becomes available. Is that a vacancy at the moment?
Sam's away. Big
Sam's away. Right, fair enough. If he gets a chance to go there, he'll go there. But I would think Dundee United, McInnes will be top of their list. Whether he would go there is another matter, but he will definitely be the number one candidate unless, as you say, they've got Yogi tied up already.
Oh, so it'll be interesting to see how all that pans out. Like I said, guys, it's our last show of this kind of format for a few weeks as we take a break at the end of the season. I'll kind of be continuing things on a Monday night 6:30. Got some Scottish football personalities, ex-players and everything all scheduled up to do what would hopefully be a live interview. So if you want to comment, ask some questions, then we should be able to go for that. But it has been an eventful season. We started doing the Play on Scottish Football show on the 2nd of November 2020, which seems like ages ago now, guys. What's been your highlight story that we've maybe covered since the 2nd of November, Stephen? What one really sticks out in your mind that we talked about that?
To be honest, and anyone who knows me is going to be so shocked at what I'm about to say here. But I genuinely think the highlight of the time since we've been doing it is Scotland qualifying. And I'm not a Scotland fan in any way, shape, or form. But I just think that that was such a momentous occasion because it was so long since they had qualified for a major tournament, and to do that and get. I mean, what we're now looking forward to. If they hadn't done what they'd done that night, we would be now wrapping things up and just counting down the days until the football season started again next season. Whereas now we've got the Euros to kind of, well, you've got 3 games in Euros because let's be honest, Scotland are not going to do anything beyond that. But you've still got Scotland being part of a major tournament for the first time since 1998. So I just think that that's a momentous thing that a sort of where were you moment, and I think that that's probably been my highlight of the year. But that probably says more about me because of the season Hearts have had. So,
is there something that sticks out in your mind, Anthony, that we've discussed since the 2nd of November that you thought, well, that was a real high point in this season's Scottish football?
I think, to be honest, overall, it's a season I think we'll all be glad to see the back of. Just the not having supporters on the ground and all that, the COVID backdrop. I think it's been probably the grimmest season on record. And you're asking about highlights, and there aren't many, to be honest, when you think about it. There's the Livingston run under Davy Martindale. I suppose Rangers winning the league is a highlight in the sense of if you were a Rangers fan, what they've done's obviously been good. St Johnstone have obviously been the team of the season in terms of winning the 2 cups. And Scotland qualifying for the Euros. But beyond that, it's been a pretty underwhelming season overall. For me, you're talking about talking points. If you're asking about the main talking point of the season, I think without a shadow of a doubt, it was the Neil Lennon Celtic fallout towards the end. I mean, that was not. I'm not glorifying it because obviously I thought it was pretty horrible to see how it unravelled for Neil Lennon and the way it all ended. But in terms of being a talking point, I don't think you'll get many bigger talking points within Scottish football than it wasn't so much Neil Lennon leaving Celtic. It was how long it all rumbled on. There was a point probably from November to February where I would imagine that probably 90% of our shows headlined on Neil Lennon and Celtic. And what's the latest? You had all that stuff with them going to Dubai. It seemed like it was one setback after another. And yes, it was pretty gruesome, but it was also really fascinating to talk about I'm not a Celtic fan by any stretch, but just to talk about it from a neutral perspective, but also to hear how Celtic fans were viewing the situation, and a massive sort of story of this titan of Celtic's modern history suddenly turning into this, I wouldn't say pariah, but it felt like that at times because so many people had turned against them, and it was just a fascinating story to cover. And I suppose if you ask me about the first 6 months of being on this show, that would be the thing that sticks out because it's what we spoke about so much.
Absolutely.
But yeah, hopefully we've got far more feel-good stories next season, and it all revolves around supporters being back in stadiums and enjoying great moments and far less talk about managers being under pressure every other. Because to be honest, I don't like putting managers under the microscope every week after a setback and what have you. But it's the nature of the beast that a couple of bad results and people turn and they want the manager out. So hopefully people getting back into the stadiums eases that situation a wee bit and we're able to enjoy far more, I suppose, highlights, positive moments over the next season. But yeah, it's been great. I think the three of us have really enjoyed it. At the start, we didn't really know how it was going to evolve. We just got together and decided to do it, and it seems like we've got a wee cult following, guys that tune in every week, and that's absolutely brilliant because I never ever saw myself as somebody who would go on a show like this and talk away about Scottish football every week. But it's become just like a chat between the three of us, but we've also got this audience that you almost forget are there at times until a wee comment pops up.
No, that's
it's been really enjoyable, and I hope all the guys that tune in have enjoyed it as much as we have.
No, exactly. I mean, thanks to all the support as well. I mean, we've got like Ian as well, who's been on, say, top show lads, top chat boys. Nah, that's great. Thanks for all the comments. Just some of the highlights that we did talk about. Obviously, you've mentioned a few. Celtic heading to Dubai. We've got the David Martindale story, 0-0. Scotland beating Serbia that you touched about, Stephen. The David Marshall saves. The manager Sugarly Peg Club, which there's been a few that's been in there. There's been rants at Robbie Nielsen and Ann Budge at Hearts. There's been Rangers finishing the league undefeated, and then the Loyal Rumble in George Square last week. Neil Lennon's lengthy departure from Celtic. Tommy Wright, the man to save Killie. Could he still do it? Yogi, the man to save Ross County, and now he's walked away. And of course the incoming knighthood of Sir Callum of Davidson as well, getting the keys to the city of Perth, no doubt. We obviously discussed so much more, but it's been an absolute pleasure talking Scottish football with my two esteemed colleagues, Mr. Stephen Commons and Anthony Brown, for this season. Thanks to everyone who's watched the show. As the season comes to a close, we are taking a little break from this format of the show, like I mentioned earlier. We're going to be back for season 21-22, and who knows what key talking points will come our way next season. Meantime, on Monday evenings, like I said, at 6:30, I'm going to try and keep the show going, as we'll be joined by some key figures in Scottish football, hopefully live as well, so that you can put their questions to them. Until then, thanks again for watching. All I've got to say is come on Scotland in the Euros, and we'll speak to you all soon on the Play on Scottish Football show.